International Women's Day, 8th of March, Khomeini started announcing measures that signaled what was to come. And we know what has come. I will not dwell on these, but it was a letdown on most of us, both inside and outside of Iran, where we had vested much hope in the call for Azadi. In 2005, I went back to Iran as a UN Special Rapporteur, and I must say, I went at the invitation of the Iranian government, which provided me an opportunity to see things as they were happening, unfolding in Iran. And I have visited, not only talked with officials, but also with civil society agents and human rights defenders, women's organizations, victims of violence, and many young women awaiting execution in Evin prison. It was an experience that I will never forget. And I have written my findings in a report to the Human Rights Council, and Madame Razavi has referred to this report. I'm happy that the report has been useful for your struggles, because unless civil society actors use these reports for their ends, UN reports and special rapporteur reports have no meaning. While we continue to observe the developments in Iran with concern, I must make one caution, that extremism and fundamentalism is not a new phenomenon. It is not limited to Iran, and it has not ended with Iran, unfortunately. If that were the case, our task would have been simpler. Fundamentalist movements date back, and it is not limited to Islam, Islamic groups for all that matters. Christian fundamentalism, Judaic groups fundamentalism, Hinduism, etc., etc. So fundamentalism and extremism comes in very different shapes and sizes and appearances. So let us have a broader picture in envisioning how we're going to deal with this problem. Otherwise, we will lock ourselves up into a box which will feed just the opposite of what we want to do and really feed on Islamophobia, which is a major problem, as well as fundamentalist movements. So, and we know in recent history there are many examples which have also resembled the Iranian experience, which started out with call for freedom and equality and so forth. The Arab Spring, just yesterday, led many young women and men to the streets with the same expectations, and yet it was shortly co-opted by extremist groups. We need to ask, why? Why does this happen? And ISIS, of course, is the main actor on stage, with the most notorious of all extremists that we have seen. I live in a geography where ISIS is now operating not at my border, but inside my borders. And I try to come to terms with the whys. Not only that I am terrorized as an individual, I fear for myself, for my loved ones, and for the people that I live with. But I also ask, as a social scientist, why is it that such groups are thriving when we have advanced so much in the area of human rights? I think Madame Manjou talked about an imperfect system, but a fairly good system that has developed in the area of international human rights. So why is it that we are still dealing, not still, but we are confronting new and more extremist movements? The gendered contract of such groups. These are not simply questions that we can simply brush away. Yes, you can say, well, they're ignorant, they're this, they're that, but I think that's a cop-out. Unless we're able to deal with these issues in a serious manner, our ability to move forward and counter them will always be incomplete. There are many scholarly books, but I think we need to look at the near history and even faraway history. For one thing, fundamentalism is very useful for power. Hegemonic powers have maintained themselves by resorting to supporting fundamentalist groups. Colonialism is full of testimonies, of examples of how colonial powers supported and empowered reactionary groups in order to control the local populations. So thereby preventing progressive groups from emerging and from developing. In more recent times, many governments have vested in their support in fundamentalist, religious fundamental groups to counter communism. And look, communism is dead, but the fundamentalists are thriving. In 1980, there was a military coup in Turkey. The generals came to save Turkey from the chaos, 10 years of chaos with the left and the right fighting one another. The saviors, in order to crush the progressive and left-wing groups, they fed the extremist Islamic groups. And today, they have a big voice in my country. So these are important issues to be mindful of. We may see these short-sighted politics as the Palestinian issue, which still remains to be one of the most shameful human rights violation and displacement to humanity. Over half a century, we are still not dealing with this issue in any successful way. People are still living in diaspora. The displacement of Palestinian people is a tragedy that is only responded to in lip service, I'm afraid. Today, we're not even talking about it, because now we have different areas of concern. Poverty. Today, the world is more affluent than ever before in history, but people are still dying of hunger. How do we explain that? All these leave a vacuum for extremists to come in and give answers to. So we can go on and on in responding to this question that I asked. In my own country, Turkey, the only Muslim majority country with secular laws. Turkey granted the right to vote for women and be elected in 1934, 10 years before the French women and in many other countries. Our secularism was not a perfect one, no doubt. We learned over time that it created its own contradiction. And in a way, the mistakes that were made in our journey to secularism empowered religious groups. But the more important thing is that in recent years, again, as a result of trying to respond to extremism, a new project was invented, Moderate Islam. And Turkey was celebrated and promoted as the Moderate Islam, example, model of a Moderate Islam. Well, one observer, one analyst wrote, Turkey's Moderate Islam is steering Turkey into a moderate Sharia. A party that is ruling for 14 years now, which started out on a very positive ground,